My name is Johanna, and I am 22 years old. At 2 a.m., I was lying on our kitchen floor, blood pooling around my head, my right leg twisted at an impossible angle. The pain was excruciating, but what hurt more was seeing my mom standing there, arms crossed, watching as my stepdad Greg continued to kick me. "Please, Mom, help me," I begged through broken teeth, crawling toward her feet. She just sneered. "You should have signed the loan." But what she whispered next. Before I continue my story, please like and subscribe if you are watching this. Let me know where you are from in the comments below. Life was not always this way. In fact, my childhood was pretty happy until my father died when I was 12. Dad was everything to me, patient, kind, and always thinking about my future. He worked as a financial advisor and made sure to set up an education trust fund specifically for my college expenses. "Education is the one thing nobody can take from you, Joe," he would say, while helping me with math homework. I never imagined how prophetic those words would become. After Dad died from a sudden heart attack, Mom and I became incredibly close. Alice Wilson, my mother, was beautiful with her blonde hair and green eyes that I had inherited. She worked as an administrative assistant at a law firm, not making much, but enough for us to stay in our modest 3-bedroom house in the suburbs. We became a team, supporting each other through the grief. I would make her tea when she had rough days, and she would braid my hair while we watched old movies on Friday nights. We had our routine, and it helped us heal. I threw myself into school determined to make Dad proud. His emphasis on financial security had made an impression, and I became the kid who saved birthday money and worked small jobs from age 14. By the time I entered university as a finance major, I had already developed solid money management skills. Working part-time in the university financial aid office gave me even more insight into the importance of fiscal responsibility. Then Greg entered our lives. Mom met him 3 years ago at her workplace, where he was consulting on some legal case. She called me at college sounding more animated than I had heard in years. "I met someone, Joe. He is so charming and actually makes me laugh again." I was happy for her. Dad had been gone for 7 years by then, and she deserved companionship. When I came home for Thanksgiving break, I met Greg Sullivan for the first time. Tall with salt and pepper hair and an easy smile, he seemed perfect for Mom. He brought her flowers, listened attentively when she spoke, and even showed interest in my studies. "A finance major, smart girl," he said, patting my shoulder. "Your mom tells me you have quite the head for numbers." Their courtship moved quickly. By Christmas he had moved in, and by spring they were married in a small ceremony. I served as maid of honor, genuinely happy to see Mom smiling again. If I noticed the speed of their relationship seemed rushed, I dismissed my concerns. After all, they were both in their 40s. Why wait? It was only after they returned from their honeymoon that I began learning about Greg's background. He had owned several businesses that just did not work out due to market conditions. He was currently between ventures, but had big plans for a new startup. His charisma made these failures sound like mere stepping stones to inevitable success. Looking back, the red flags were there from the beginning. The way he checked Mom's phone when she stepped away, how he would make offhand comments about her spending habits. The fact that he always seemed to have an opinion about her friends, gradually suggesting some were not good influences. But these incidents were subtle, scattered between genuine moments of kindness and care. My visits home became less frequent as college demands increased. Each time I returned, subtle changes had occurred. The house felt different, the atmosphere tense rather than warm. Mom seemed more anxious, checking with Greg before making decisions she would have previously made independently. Let me ask. Greg first became her standard response to almost any question. Our phone conversations grew shorter, more superficial. When I would ask about her life, she would quickly redirect to ask about my classes or internship applications. Plans for her to visit me at school were made then canceled last minute when something came up with Greg's business. I tried maintaining our connection, sending care packages with her favorite tea and books I thought she would enjoy. Her thank you texts seemed rushed, lacking the warmth and detail of our earlier communications. When I asked pointed questions about how she was really doing, her answers became increasingly vague. "Everything is fine, honey. Just busy with work and helping Greg with his new project." By the beginning of my senior year, the distance between us had grown into a chasm I did not know how to bridge. The woman who had been my best friend after Dad died now felt like a distant acquaintance. I told myself it was natural part of growing up and Mom building a new life. I wanted to believe she was happy, even as the knot of worry in my stomach grew with each truncated phone call and canceled visit. The first concrete sign that something was seriously wrong came during my fall break visit. Mom had always been meticulous about our home and finances, a habit formed from years of single parenting on a tight budget. Walking into the house, I noticed immediate changes. The garden she had lovingly tended was overgrown mail piled up on the entry table, and a faint smell of cigarettes hung in the air, though neither Mom nor I had ever smoked. In the kitchen, I spotted a disconnection notice from the electric company stuck to the refrigerator. When I asked about it, Mom quickly snatched it away. "Just a mix-up with the payment," she said, with forced cheerfulness. "Greg is handling it." I later learned that Greg had quit his most recent job to focus on his business plan using Mom's savings as startup capital. The business, something vague about online marketing, seemed to consist mainly of Greg making calls from the den and taking long lunches with potential investors who never materialized. The house title had been transferred to include Greg's name, though he had contributed nothing to the mortgage Mom had faithfully paid for 15 years. She no longer had independent access to her own bank accounts, with Greg insisting they combine everything like real partners. Yet his expenditures continued unabated. A new golf set, designer clothes, weekend trips with business associates, while Mom picked up extra shifts at the law firm. "Mom, is everything okay with money?" I asked carefully, after noticing her wearing the same worn blouse I remembered from high school. "Of course, sweetie. Just being careful until Greg's business takes off. You know how startups are lots of investment before the returns come in." One evening, I overheard them arguing in their bedroom. "How could you spend the property tax money on another business lunch?" Mom's voice trembled. "We will lose the house, Greg." His response sent chills through me. "Stop being so dramatic, Alice. If you were more supportive instead of constantly nagging, maybe I could focus better on making us rich. Is that too much to ask? After everything I have done for you?" The emotional manipulation extended beyond finances. Greg would make passive-aggressive comments about my education whenever I visited. "Must be nice to have Daddy's money paying your way," he remarked once as I studied at the kitchen table. "Some of us have to work in the real world." When I reminded him that I worked 20 hours weekly in addition to my full course load, he waved dismissively. "Playing around in the university office is not real work, princess." His resentment toward my trust fund became increasingly obvious, though he masked it as concern. "That money is just sitting there when your mother could use help. Seems selfish, that is all I am saying." He began creating emergencies whenever I planned visits home. The time Mom and I arranged a spa day for her birthday, Greg suddenly needed her to drive him to an urgent business meeting because his car would not start. The car worked perfectly fine the next day. When I expressed concerns about these patterns to Mom, she became immediately defensive. "You do not understand the pressure he is under, or marriage requires compromise, Johanna. You will learn that someday. Her friends gradually stopped coming around. Her sister, my Aunt Sarah, called me with concerns after being turned away at the door during an attempted surprise visit. Greg said your mom was too sick for visitors, but I heard her in the background asking who was there. Something feels off, Johanna. Holidays became smaller, controlled affairs. Greg dictated who could be invited and for how long. The joyful, open celebrations of my childhood were replaced by tense, carefully orchestrated events where Mom spent more time watching Greg's mood than enjoying company. The physical warning signs began appearing about 6 months before everything fell apart. During a weekend visit, I noticed Mom wincing as she reached for a dish in the cabinet. "Did you hurt your back?" I asked. "No, just bumped into the counter yesterday. I am so clumsy lately." She pulled her sleeve down, but not before I glimpsed the distinct finger-shaped bruises on her upper arm. I began seeing more evidence. Mom flinching when Greg moved suddenly, her startled jump when he called her name, significant weight loss that made her clothes hang loosely on her once healthy frame, the dark circles under her eyes that makeup could not fully conceal. During that same visit, I went to the bathroom in the middle of the night and found Mom sitting on the edge of the tub, silently crying. "Mom, please talk to me," I begged, kneeling beside her. "Whatever is happening, we can fix it together." She wiped her tears quickly. "Every marriage has rough patches, Joe. This is nothing we cannot handle. Greg is just stressed about the business. Things will get better soon." Back at school, I researched domestic abuse warning signs, feeling sick as I checked box after box on the list. I reached out to Mom's sister, sharing my fears. "I have tried inviting her to stay with me," Aunt Sarah confirmed. "She always has an excuse why she cannot come." "I am worried too, but I do not know how to help someone who will not admit they need help." I saved what money I could from my campus job, creating an emergency fund in case Mom needed to escape quickly. I downloaded articles about domestic violence resources and safety planning to my computer, hoping I was overreacting, but fearing I was not. The situation exploded in late February of my senior year. I received a frantic call from Mom on a Tuesday afternoon between classes. "Johanna, honey, I need to ask you something important," she began, her voice unnaturally high. "That trust fund from your father, how exactly does it work again?" Alarm bells immediately rang in my head. I had explained the trust structure to her multiple times over the years. The money was specifically designated for educational expenses, with the principal inaccessible until I completed my degree. A trustee from Dad's former firm oversaw all distributions directly to the university. "Why are you asking about this now, Mom?" "Greg has found an amazing investment opportunity," she rushed on, ignoring my question. "The returns would solve all our problems, but we need capital quickly. Just a loan from your fund for 6 months, then you would get it all back plus interest." In the background, I could hear Greg prompting her. "Tell her about the guaranteed return percentage." The conversation marked the beginning of intense pressure that would only escalate. I carefully explained again that the trust legally could not be used for anything other than education without severe penalties and potential loss of the entire amount. The trustees would never approve such a transaction. "That is just bureaucratic nonsense," Greg said, apparently taking the phone from Mom. "Family helps family, Johanna. Your mother has sacrificed everything for you. Is this how you repay her?" This initial request snowballed into daily calls and texts. Greg alternated between guilt trips and enticing promises. "This opportunity will not wait forever," or, "I guess we know where your priorities lie, not with the mother who raised you." The situation became even more concerning when Greg showed up unannounced at my campus apartment one evening. Mom was noticeably absent. "I thought we should talk man to man," he said, trying to push past me into my apartment. "I am a woman, Greg, and this is not a good time," I replied, blocking the doorway. His charming facade slipped momentarily, eyes hardening before he forced a laugh. Always the comedian. "Listen, the situation at home is worse than your mother is telling you. We could lose the house. Is that what you want your mother homeless because you are being stubborn about money sitting unused?" When logical explanations about the trust's legal restrictions failed to deter him, Greg changed tactics. "There are other ways to access the money. We could take a private loan with you as co-signer. Your credit is excellent, thanks to your father's planning." I later discovered they had already taken loan applications in my name, which explained the credit inquiries I had recently spotted on my monitoring app. The deception cut deep, but worse, was learning the real reason behind their desperation. My roommate Zoe's boyfriend worked at a local bank. Through him, I learned Greg had accumulated substantial gambling debts to people who did not resolve unpaid accounts through conventional means. This was not about a business opportunity at all. Every attempt I made to speak with Mom alone was intercepted. Phone calls went to voicemail, then I would receive texts clearly written by Greg, but sent from her phone. "Stop trying to come between us. Greg is the only one who has stood by me. If you really loved me, you would help." Finally, an ultimatum came. "We need you home this weekend for a family meeting," Greg demanded over the phone. "This situation ends now, one way or another." Mom's voice in the background sounded strained as she added, "Please, Johanna, just come home and listen." The implied threat in Greg's tone made my decision. I would go home one last time, not to sign anything, but to try reaching Mom directly to make her see what was happening. I gathered documentation from the trust administrator, outlining the legal impossibilities of what they wanted. I prepared a folder of domestic abuse resources and information about shelters. Before leaving, I told Zoe exactly where I was going and established a check-in schedule. "If you do not hear from me every 2 hours until Sunday, call this number," I said, giving her the direct line to a police officer who had given a campus safety lecture. As I drove the familiar route to my childhood home, I fluctuated between determination and dread. I never imagined it would be the last time I would make that drive as the person I had been for 22 years. I arrived at the house around 6 on Friday evening. The lawn, once Mom's pride, was now patchy and overgrown. Paint peeled from the window frames, and the porch light flickered intermittently in the gathering dusk. This neglect from a woman who used to plant fresh flowers each season spoke volumes about her deteriorating situation. Greg answered the door with forced joviality, embracing me in a hug I did not return. There she is, the financial genius of the family. Mom stood behind him, thinner than I had ever seen her. Her smile did not reach her eyes, which darted nervously between Greg and me. "Dinner is almost ready," she said softly. The house smelled stale dishes piled in the sink, despite the special family dinner Greg had promised. We ate store-bought lasagna in near silence, with Greg making occasional over-enthusiastic comments about family unity and pulling together in tough times. He drank steadily throughout the meal, refilling his wine glass while Mom barely touched her food. I tried engaging Mom in normal conversation. "How is Diane from your office? Did her daughter have the baby yet?" Before Mom could answer, Greg interrupted. "Let us not bore Johanna with office gossip. She is only here for the weekend. We have important matters to discuss." Yet, he deliberately avoided any actual discussion of the loan or financial matters through dinner, keeping the conversation superficial while continuing to drink. Mom grew increasingly tense, flinching when Greg's voice rose or when he moved suddenly to grab the wine bottle. The strategy was clear. Wait until later. Wear me down. Perhaps hope the wine would make me more compliant as well. After dinner, I offered to help Mom with dishes. No need, Greg said firmly. Alice, why don't you make coffee? I think it is time we got down to business with our daughter. The way he said our daughter made my skin crawl. He disappeared briefly into the den, returning with a manila envelope. Inside were loan papers already filled out, with my information needing only my signature. The loan amount was for $75,000, nearly the entire remaining balance of my trust fund. This is a sure thing, Johanna Gregg began his sales pitch polished, despite the slight slurring from alcohol. 30% return in 6 months guaranteed. I took a deep breath and opened my own folder. I brought information from the trust administrator. What you are asking is legally impossible. The trustee would never approve this transaction, and attempting to circumvent it could result in fraud charges. I laid out the documents, methodically explaining in the calm, clear voice I had practiced. Additionally, using my name or information to apply for loans without my permission is identity theft. I have already placed a freeze on my credit to prevent further applications. Greg's facade of friendly persuasion began cracking. His face flushed, red jaw clenching as I continued. If you are in financial trouble, there are legitimate resources available. I am happy to help Mom access credit counseling services. Mom remained silent throughout my explanation, staring fixedly at the table. I tried addressing her directly. Mom, whatever is happening, we can figure it out together, but not like this. That is when Greg snapped. He swept the papers from the table in a violent motion, sending them scattering across the dining room floor. You ungrateful little bitch, he snarled, mask of civility completely gone. After everything we have done for you. He grabbed his half-full wine glass and hurled it against the wall, red liquid spattering like blood across the family photos. Mom gasped, but remained frozen in her seat, eyes downcast. I stood reaching for my purse. I think I should leave. This conversation is not productive. You are not going anywhere, Greg said, moving with surprising speed to block the doorway. Not until you sign those papers. Greg, there are literally no papers I can sign that would give you access to that money. The trust is ironclad. I tried keeping my voice steady, reasonable. Moving or threatening me will not change legal facts. The first shove caught me off guard, his hands, connecting with my shoulders and sending me stumbling backward against the dining table. The corner caught me in the ribs, pain shooting through my side. Mom finally spoke a small sound that might have been the beginning of a protest. Greg silenced her with a look. This is not going to solve anything, I said, trying to edge toward the side door to the kitchen. Let me leave, and we can talk when everyone is calmer. His face transformed with rage, becoming something inhuman and terrifying. You think you are so much better than me with your college education and your trust fund. Your precious daddy's money. The first punch caught me across the cheekbone, sending explosions of light across my vision. I stumbled backward, disoriented, tripping over the step down into the kitchen. My balance failed, and I fell awkwardly, tumbling down the 3 steps into the kitchen. The sound of bone snapping was audible as my leg twisted unnaturally beneath me. My head struck the tile floor, and copper filled my mouth as teeth cut into my lip. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, radiating from my leg in sickeningly intense waves. I tried to scream, but could only produce a choked gurgle through the blood filling my mouth. Disoriented ears ringing from the impact, I could only register Greg's looming figure descending the steps toward me. Get up, he spat, kicking at my already injured leg. The pain intensified beyond anything I had ever experienced. Is this what you wanted? To destroy this family? I rolled onto my side, trying to protect my broken leg, spitting blood onto the once white kitchen tiles. Through my rapidly swelling eye, I saw Mom slowly walking down the steps, her face a mask I could not read. "Mom," I gasped, reaching toward her. "Please, help me." Greg continued his assault kicks, now targeting my ribs and back. "You could have fixed everything with your signature." "One signature?" I screamed as his boot connected with my broken leg. Again, vision going white with pain. Through the haze, I focused on the kitchen clock. 2 in the morning. How had it gotten so late? How long had this been going on? "Stop," I begged, no longer addressing Greg, but looking directly at my mother. "Mom, please make him stop." I began dragging myself across the floor, leaving a trail of blood from my split lip and cut scalp. The kitchen tiles cold against my palm's broken leg, scraping excruciatingly with each movement. The distance to where Mom stood seemed impossible, but instinct drove me toward her, toward the protection I still desperately wanted to believe she would provide. When I finally reached her, I looked up through swollen eyes, reaching for her ankle. "Mom, please help me," I whispered, blood bubbling between broken teeth. She stood rigid, arms crossed tightly across her chest. Her face, the face that had once sung me lullabies and kissed away childhood hurts, now stared down with cold detachment. "You should have signed the loan," she said, voice flat and unfamiliar. In that moment, something broke inside me more painful than any physical injury. As Greg paused his assault, breathing heavily, and watching this exchange, I clung to my mother's ankle in one last desperate plea. She leaned down then, and for a fleeting second I thought she had come to her senses. Instead, she whispered the words that would forever sever our bond. "You are not my daughter anymore. Greg is my family now." Those words sliced through the last threads of hope I had been clinging to. In that devastating moment of clarity, I understood no help would come from the woman who had given birth to me. If I was going to survive this night, I would have to save myself. Through the fog of pain and betrayal, I noticed my phone had fallen from my pocket during the struggle. It lay just a few feet away, screen cracked, but still lit. Greg had stepped back, engaged in a heated whisper with Mom about what to do next. "She will call the police," Mom hissed. "We need to stop her." "She is not calling anyone," Greg responded, reaching for the bottle of whiskey on the counter. Their momentary distraction gave me the opening I needed. Gathering every ounce of determination, I began inching toward my phone, biting my lip to keep from screaming as my broken leg dragged across the floor. Each movement was agony, but the adrenaline coursing through my system provided the strength I desperately needed. My fingers had just closed around the phone when Greg turned back. "What do you think you are doing?" he roared, lunging toward me. Pure survival instinct took over. I rolled onto my back and used my good leg to deliver a defensive kick to his knee as he approached. The impact was enough to make him stumble, giving me precious seconds to dial 911 with trembling, blood-slicked fingers. 911. "What is your emergency?" The operator's calm voice was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. "Help me!" I screamed as Greg recovered and lunged again. 23 Maple Street! He is killing me!" I managed to gasp our address before Greg's boot connected with my hand, sending the phone skittering across the floor. "You stupid bitch!" he snarled, face contorted with rage. "Do you have any idea what you have done?" Mom's reaction was immediate panic. "The police, Greg, what do we do? They will be here any minute." Greg grabbed my hair, yanking my head up painfully. "Did they get the address? Did they?" He slapped me hard when I did not answer immediately. "I do not know," I gasped truthfully. In my panicked state, I was not sure if I had said enough for help to find me. Greg turned to Mom, calculation, replacing rage in his eyes. We need to get her out of here before they arrive. The basement. Terror washed through me as he grabbed my broken leg and began dragging me toward the basement door. The pain was so intense, I nearly lost consciousness. Black spots dancing across my vision. No one will find you down there until we figure this out, he grunted, struggling with my dead weight. By then we will be long gone. Desperation gave me one last surge of strength. As he pulled me past the kitchen island, I remembered the self-defense class from freshman orientation. The instructor's voice echoed in my head. Use whatever you have. Fight dirty if your life depends on it. My hand closed around a heavy wooden pepper grinder on the counter. As Greg bent to adjust his grip on my leg, I swung with all my remaining strength. The makeshift weapon connected with his temple with a sickening thud, sending him staggering backward. His knee, already weakened from my earlier kick, buckled. He went down hard head, striking the edge of the counter, before he crumpled to the floor, momentarily stunned. The next few minutes blurred into a chaos of shouting and frantic movement. Mom and Greg arguing bitterly about what to do, blame flying between them. This is your fault, Mom spat at him. You went too far. Me, you just stood there watching, he shot back. You are as guilty as I am. Their self-preservation instincts quickly overcame their mutual recriminations. I heard Greg say, "We need to go, now, before the cops get here." Mom did not even look at me, as she rushed upstairs, returning moments later with a hastily packed bag. She grabbed her purse, extracting cash from her wallet and gathering important documents from the kitchen drawer. Not once did her eyes meet mine as I lay bleeding on her kitchen floor. "This is not over," Greg threatened as they prepared to flee. "You keep your mouth shut about this if you know what is good for you." The sound of their car starting and tires screeching from the driveway left me in sudden, deafening silence. Alone and severely injured, I focused on staying conscious, knowing that passing out could mean never waking up again. The adrenaline that had kept me fighting began to fade, allowing the full extent of pain to wash over me. My broken leg throbbed with each heartbeat, ribs screaming with every shallow breath. The metallic taste of blood filled my mouth, and the kitchen tiles felt ice cold against my cheek. To keep myself awake, I began counting the white ceiling tiles, forcing my mind to focus on the simple task. 1, 2, 3. I made it to 37 before the distant wail of sirens penetrated my consciousness. The sound grew steadily louder, a lifeline pulling me back from the edge of darkness. Red and blue lights flashed through the kitchen windows, casting surreal patterns across the blood-spattered floor. I heard shouting then, the splintering crack of the front door being forced open. "Police? Hello, anyone here?" "Kitchen." I tried to call, but my voice emerged as little more than a whisper. Footsteps approached rapidly, and suddenly the room filled with officers, weapons drawn, scanning for threats. "In here, we have a victim." A female officer knelt beside me, holstering her weapon. "Ambulance is right behind us." "Stay with me." "Okay. What is your name?" "Johanna." I managed, tears of relief streaming down my face. They left. My mom and stepdad. They did this. The officer took my hand, her touch, gentle but secure. "Johanna, you are safe now. We will find them, I promise you that." Paramedics rushed in, their efficient movements a blur as they assessed my injuries. Multiple fractures possible. Internal bleeding, head trauma, one reported into a radio. "We need to move her now." The process of being transferred to a backboard sent fresh waves of agony through my broken body, but the paramedics worked with practiced care. "You are doing great, Johanna." "Stay with us," the female paramedic encouraged, as they secured my neck in a brace. As they lifted me onto the stretcher, I caught a glimpse of the family photos still hanging on the wall. Mom and me at my high school graduation, Dad holding me on his shoulders at the beach. The wedding photo of Mom and Greg, their smiles, now seeming like grotesque masks rather than expressions of joy. The surreal feeling of leaving my childhood home on a stretcher surrounded by police and paramedics struck me with full force. This chapter of my life had closed permanently, sealed with blood and betrayal. As the ambulance doors closed behind me, I knew I would never return to that house again. I drifted in and out of consciousness during the ambulance ride, and have only fragmented memories of the emergency room. Bright lights, urgent voices, the sharp sting of an IV needle, a doctor saying, "She needs surgery immediately." When I fully regained consciousness, sunlight was streaming through unfamiliar windows. I blinked against the brightness, trying to orient myself. A hospital room, the steady beep of monitors, an IV line in my arm, and the dull throb of pain held at bay by medication. "Welcome back," said a nurse with kind eyes, adjusting something on my IV pump. "I am Valerie. You have been in and out for about 18 hours, which is normal after what you have been through." The events of that night came rushing back, bringing with them a wave of physical and emotional pain so intense I gasped. Valerie quickly increased my pain medication. "Easy now. You are safe here." A doctor came in shortly after, explaining my injuries in clinical terms that somehow made them easier to process. Compound fracture of the right tibia, requiring surgical insertion of a titanium rod. 3 broken ribs. Facial fractures, concussion, internal bleeding that had fortunately resolved without additional surgery. "You were very lucky," the doctor concluded. "The head injury could have been much worse." Lucky was not a word I would have chosen, but I understood what she meant. I was alive when I easily might not have been. 2 police officers waited until the doctor finished before introducing themselves. "We need to take your statement when you feel up to it," the female officer explained gently. "Take your time." Recounting the events was excruciating, especially describing my mother's role in the attack. The words stuck in my throat as I forced myself to say, "She just watched. She did nothing to stop him." The officers exchanged glances I could not interpret. "We have issued an alert for both Gregory and Alice Sullivan," the male officer informed me. "Their car was found abandoned at a bus station 50 miles north. We will find them." A social worker visited next, explaining resources for victims of domestic violence and assault. She helped me obtain an emergency restraining order against both Greg and my mother, a surreal process that hammered home the new reality of my life. Later that afternoon, my roommate Zoe arrived, tears streaming down her face when she saw my condition. "I knew something was wrong when you did not check in," she said carefully, placing a bag of personal items on the bedside table. "The police called this morning. I brought some clothes and your laptop." Her familiar presence broke through the shock that had insulated me since the attack. I began to cry deep, racking sobs that hurt my broken ribs but could not be contained. Zoe held my hand until the storm passed. "The university dean called," she told me once I had calmed. "They are arranging for you to complete your coursework remotely. Everyone wants to help Joe." The trust administrator visited the following day, a serious man in a charcoal suit who had managed my father's estate since his death. "I came as soon as I heard," he said, looking genuinely shaken by my appearance. "I want to assure you that your trust fund is completely secure. We denied multiple irregular requests from your mother and Mr. Sullivan over the past months." This revelation sent a fresh wave of betrayal through me. They had been trying to access my money behind my back for months before the direct confrontation. "They claimed educational expenses for courses you were supposedly taking at a private institute," he explained. "The documentation looked suspicious, so we verified directly with your university that you were enrolled full-time there. That is standard procedure, but I should have alerted you directly to these attempts. My Aunt Sarah arrived from Cleveland the next day, bringing comfort and outrage in equal measure. I knew something was wrong, she said carefully, embracing me around my injuries. I should have done more. We all missed signs, I assured her, though the words felt hollow. How had we failed to recognize the danger until it was too late? The hospital staff showed extraordinary kindness during my 10-day stay. Nurses who sat with me through nightmares. A physical therapist who understood when pain caused frustrated tears. The night janitor who always paused to ask how I was feeling. My former high school English teacher, Mrs. Winters, visited with books to pass the long hospital hours. Literature reminds us we are not alone in suffering, she said, placing a well-worn copy of Jane Eyre on my table. Others have walked difficult paths before us and found their way through. As my body began the slow process of healing, I also started therapy sessions at first from my hospital bed, and later as an outpatient. The therapist, Dr. Levine, helped me understand that what happened was not a sudden aberration, but the culmination of a long pattern of abuse. Your mother was a victim of domestic abuse herself, she explained, but that does not excuse her failure to protect you or her participation in your assault. Understanding the pattern does not mean absolving responsibility. We identified earlier warning signs I had dismissed or rationalized. The increasing isolation, the financial control, the subtle undermining of my relationship with my mother. Greg had been laying groundwork for years, gradually separating Mom from her support systems and identity, until she became an extension of his will rather than an independent person. It is called coercive control, Dr. Levine explained. And it is particularly insidious because it happens so gradually the victim often does not recognize it until they are deeply trapped. 3 weeks after the attack, I received the call I had been both dreading and hoping for. Greg and Mom had been located and arrested in a motel 2 states away. They would be extradited back to face charges of assault, battery, attempted murder, and financial fraud. The bail hearing was my first time seeing them since that night. I insisted on attending despite my doctor's concerns, needing to prove to myself that I could face them. Entering the courtroom on crutches, surgical scars still fresh, I felt a wave of nausea at the sight of them in prison jumpsuits. Greg looked diminished without his expensive clothes and confident manner. Mom sat separately with her own attorney eyes fixed on the table before her. Neither looked in my direction, though. I stared openly at them, searching for any sign of the mother I had loved in the hollow-eyed woman before me. The prosecutor had prepared me for what would happen, but the reality was still jarring. Greg's attorney arguing he had no prior violent offenses. Mom's lawyer claiming she too was a victim, coerced and fearful. The judge setting bail too high for either to meet, ensuring they would remain in custody until trial. As weeks passed, evidence mounted against them both. Text messages threatening me if I did not cooperate with their demands. Financial records showing attempts to access my trust fund through fraudulent means. My medical records documenting the extensive injuries from the assault. Greg eventually accepted a plea deal, 15 years for attempted murder, with the financial fraud charges running concurrently. Mom maintained her claim of coercion, seeking a separate trial strategy that would paint her as another of Greg's victims rather than my attacker. My emotions about her remained painfully complex. In therapy sessions, I worked through overwhelming anger, deep grief, and confusing flashes of empathy. She was trapped in an abusive relationship, I would say, then immediately follow with, end quote. But so have countless other people who never helped hurt their children. Both things can be true, Dr. Levine reminded me. She was a victim of abuse and she failed catastrophically in her duty to protect you. You can acknowledge the first without excusing the second. I read books about trauma bonds and coercive control, trying to understand the psychological manipulation that had transformed my loving mother into someone who could stand by watching her daughter bleed. Knowledge brought context, but not comfort. Understanding the mechanisms of abuse did not heal the wound of betrayal. At night, dreams brought confused images. Mom, as I remembered her from childhood, braiding my hair and singing softly. Mom standing impassively as Greg's boot connected with my ribs. These contradictory versions could not be reconciled into a single person I could either fully hate or love. In my therapy journal, I wrote letters to her that would never be sent. Some filled with rage, others with questions. Still others with memories of happier times that now felt tainted by knowledge of what would come. The writing helped externalize the storm of emotions that threatened to overwhelm me from within. The person you thought she was, and the person she revealed herself to be that night both exist, Dr. Levine said. Part of your healing journey is learning to hold those contradictions without allowing them to destroy you. Physical recovery was a grueling process that tested my endurance daily. The titanium rod in my leg meant months of physical therapy learning to walk again, step by painful step. The first time I put weight on my injured leg, the pain nearly made me vomit, but the physical therapist, Maria, remained encouraging. Pain means healing in this case, she assured me. Your body is rebuilding itself stronger. I developed a permanent slight limp, a physical reminder of survival I would carry forever. Dental work repaired my broken teeth, though sensitivity remained. Scars faded from angry red to silvery lines, mapping the landscape of that night on my skin. 6 months after the attack, I underwent the final surgery to remove some of the hardware from my leg. Waking up in the recovery room, I felt a strange sense of completion. The external markers of trauma were being removed, even as the internal work of healing continued. The day I finally walked unassisted across my new apartment was a victory worth celebrating. My roommate Zoe, who had moved in to help during my recovery, decorated the living room with streamers and baked my favorite chocolate chip cookies. To walking under your own power, she toasted raising a cookie like a champagne glass, and to telling medical odds to go to hell. Building a new life meant creating safety in tangible ways. My apartment had security features my budget could barely afford, but my peace of mind required. Deadbolts, window alarms, a doorman building. Physical safety formed the foundation upon which other healing could be built. Returning to complete my final semester took courage and support. The university created accommodations, allowing me to finish some coursework remotely and extending deadlines when pain or trauma symptoms interfered with concentration. Professors who had known me for years showed unexpected kindness, checking in without prying, and offering assistance without pity. The financial aid office where I had worked converted my position to a virtual role I could perform from home during recovery. This practical help meant more than just income. It represented continuity, a thread connecting my before and after selves. That connection extended to my career path. Upon graduation, I accepted a position with a nonprofit focused on financial literacy for domestic violence survivors. Many abuse victims stay because they literally cannot afford to leave, my new boss explained during the interview. Your finance background combined with your personal experience makes you uniquely qualified to help. The first holiday season after the attack presented both challenge and opportunity. Thanksgiving had always been at home with Mom. Christmas meant our traditional cookie baking marathon. These rituals now belonged to a life that no longer existed. Create new traditions, Dr. Levine suggested. Acknowledge the grief for what was lost, then actively build something new. Zoe and I hosted a Friendsgiving for others who could not go home for various reasons. For Christmas, I volunteered serving meals at a women's shelter, finding unexpected healing in helping others who also faced a holiday season marked by absence and change. The protective presence of a rescue dog named Cooper became another cornerstone of recovery. The shepherd mix from the local shelter had his own history of abuse, making us a matched set of survivors learning to trust again. His alert barking at unexpected noises provided security. His unwavering loyalty offered comfort on nights when nightmares drove sleep away. Art therapy opened another avenue for processing trauma too complex for words alone. I had never considered myself artistic, but the simple act of putting color to paper bypassed intellectual defenses accessing emotions I struggled to articulate. Abstract representations of rage, fear, grief, and eventually hope emerged through paint and clay, externalized in forms I could literally set aside when they became too overwhelming. New friendships developed, particularly with fellow survivors I met through support groups. These connections carried unique value, free from the need to explain or justify reactions that seemed incomprehensible to those who had not experienced similar trauma. The shorthand understanding of trigger days or hypervigilance created space for healing without judgment. Dating again came much later, approaching trust with careful deliberation rather than fear. My first relationship after the attack was with Ethan, a law student who demonstrated respect for boundaries not through grand declarations but through consistent actions. When nightmares woke me, he learned to give space rather than immediate physical comfort. When certain topics triggered anxiety, he adjusted without requiring explanation. Healing does not mean erasing the past, I explained, when he asked about my hyper-awareness of exits in public places. It means building a life where the past informs but does not control the present. The legal proceedings continued their slow progression through the system. Greg's plea deal brought some closure his 15-year sentence, ensuring he would not be a physical threat for a significant time. Mom's case proved more complicated, her legal strategy evolving as evidence mounted. In the end, she also accepted a plea arrangement 5 years with mandatory counseling and rehabilitation. The prosecutor called to ask if I wanted to make a victim impact statement at her sentencing. You have the right to address the court, and her, directly, he explained. Many victims find it empowering. After days of consideration and a long therapy session, I decided to speak. Standing at the podium in the courtroom, I looked directly at my mother for the first time since the night of the attack. Her eyes, so like my own, finally met mine. The physical injuries will heal, I began, voice steady, despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm me. The broken bones, the torn skin, the concussion, doctors can fix those things. What cannot be repaired so easily is the foundation of trust that shattered that night. When a mother who should protect her child instead becomes complicit in her harm, it breaks something fundamental in how that child views the world. I continued speaking, not just to her, but to the court record and to myself. I understand now about coercive control and trauma bonds. I have studied the psychology of abuse and why victims sometimes participate in harming others. Understanding these mechanisms brings context but not excuse, explanation but not absolution. Mom wept silently as I spoke, but I kept my focus and composure. I am rebuilding my life without you in it. That is the consequence of your choices. I hope you find healing in your own journey, but that journey cannot include me, at least not now, and perhaps not ever. After her sentencing, she sent a letter through her attorney seeking forgiveness and contact. I placed it in a drawer unopened. Dr. Levine supported this decision. Forgiveness may or may not come in time, but reconciliation is an entirely separate question. You get to decide the boundaries of your healing. The 1-year anniversary of the attack became a day of reflection. I lit a candle for the Johanna who existed before that night, acknowledging grief for the person I had been and the innocence lost. Then I lit a second candle for the person I was becoming, stronger in the broken places, as Hemingway once wrote. My work helping abused survivors rebuild financial independence brought purpose from pain. Each woman who opened her first independent bank account or secured safe housing using skills from our program represented possibility rising from devastation. Speaking at university domestic violence awareness events allowed me to transform my experience into education. Watch for financial control, I would emphasize. Isolation happens gradually. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. The trust fund my father established for my education now funds scholarships for survivors pursuing degrees after escaping abuse. The symmetry of this repurposing brings a sense of completion of damage, transformed into opportunity for others. The journey continues, neither linear nor finite. Some days still bring flashbacks or moments when grief rises unexpectedly. The difference now is that these experiences exist alongside joy, purpose, and connection rather than defining my entire existence. I have learned that family can be chosen, not just born into. That strength often emerges most powerfully through vulnerability. That helping others heal contributes to my own recovery in ways I never anticipated. Sometimes you have to lose your family to find your strength, your voice, and ultimately yourself. My story continues beyond that terrible night, beyond betrayal and pain, into a future I am creating day by day, choice by choice, on my own terms. If you have experienced abuse or know someone who has, please remember that support is available. No one should face this journey alone. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you in any way, please like and subscribe to this channel. Share with someone who might need to hear that survival and rebuilding are possible. Have you ever had to create boundaries with family members who hurt you? Let me know in the comments below. Your story matters too.